extraordinary and heroic day to all of you. I am Erica May S. Garcia, your resource speaker for today. We will discuss to you the importance of the invoicing requirements or the BIR documentations. But before we start, I would like to discuss to you first the classification of documents. So there are two classification of documents. Number one is the principal receipts or invoices. Second is the supplementary receipts or invoices. What are the principal receipts or invoices? Principal receipts or invoices are a written account evidencing the sale of goods or services issued to customers by the vendors or the suppliers. There are four types of principal receipts or invoices. Number one is the VAT sales invoice. Number two is the VAT official receipts, which are issued by a VAT registered persons. Next, there is also a non-VAT sales invoice and a non-VAT official receipts, which are issued by a non-VAT registered person. Next is the supplementary receipts or invoices. So, what are the supplementary receipts or invoices? So, these also known as commercial invoices, a written account evidencing the transactions has been made between the seller and the buyer of goods or services. Supplementary receipts and invoices also form part of the books of accounts of a business taxpayer for recording, monitoring, and control purposes. They are also evidence of delivery or an agreement to sell or transfer of goods and services, which includes but are not limited to delivery receipts, order slips, debit or credit memo, purchase order, job order, provisional or temporary receipt, acknowledgement receipt, collection receipt, cash receipt, bill of lading, billing statement, statement of account, and any other document. Please note that these are not valid proof to support the claim of input taxes by buyer of goods or services. So, these are only supplementary as stated in its name. So, please remember that these are not valid proof to support the claim of input taxes for VAT return purposes. Now, you all know the classification of documents. We will now move on our main topic, the invoicing requirements or the BIR documentation per Section 113 of the National Internal Revenue Code. So, per Section 113 of the NIRC, a VAT registered person shall issue a VAT invoice for the sale, barter, or exchange of goods or properties, while a VAT official receipt for the list of goods or properties and sale, barter, or exchange of services. Please note that only VAT registered persons are required to print their tax identification number or TIN followed by the word VAT in their invoices or official receipts. The said documents shall be considered as VAT invoice or VAT official receipt. All purchases covered by invoices or receipts other than VAT invoice or VAT official receipts shall not give rise to any input tax. So, as discussed earlier, these invoices are the supplementary receipts or invoices. So, the VAT invoice or the VAT official receipts shall be prepared at least in duplicate. So, the original copy will be given to the buyer and the duplicate copy will remain to the seller for accounting purposes and documentation. There are information that should be contained in our documents. So, the following information that we will discuss shall be indicated in the VAT invoice or VAT official receipts issued by the supplier or the vendor to its buyer or customer. Number 1. Statement that the seller is a VAT registered person, followed by the tax identification number. As seen in our example, so EFG Corporation obviously state that he is a VAT registered corporation. Next is that VAT must be shown as a separate item in the invoice or OR. So, if you are checking an official receipt or VAT official receipt or VAT invoices, you should check first that the VAT should be or the VAT have a separate line item for its amount in the invoice or OR. Next is that for the sales to VAT registered persons amounting to 1,000 or more, indicate the name, business style if any, its address, and TIN of the purchaser. For clarification, the 1,000 is exclusive of VAT. So the amount should be exclusive of VAT, 1,000 or more, not inclusive. So in our example, the supplier indicate the name, the TIN, the address, and the business style of its customers. Next is that there should also be a date, the quantity, the unit cost, and the description of the goods or properties or nature of the services in the document. Next information is the authority to print details and the serial number of booklets. But for this information, the BIR released the Revenue Regulation number 6-2022, removing its validity or the validity of invoices and official receipts. Later on in our presentation, we will discuss this furthermore. But for our presentation purposes, I have included it. But this information should be omitted or disregarded when checking the validity of the VAT official receipts and the invoices. Next information, if the sale is subject to 0% VAT, the term zero-rated sales, as presented in our sample, shall be written or printed prominently on the invoice or receipt. If the sale involves items which are subject to VAT and some of which are VAT zero rated or VAT exempt, the invoice or receipt shall clearly indicate the breakdown of the sales price between its taxable, exempt, and zero-rated components. So, in our VAT official receipt and VAT invoices, as stated in section 113 of the NIRC, there should be a breakdown for easy reference or for easy identification of the buyer. And for the easy identification of the BIR. The calculation of the VAT on each portion of the sale shall be shown on the invoices or receipt. So it should be clear in the invoices or receipt the computation of the VAT. In addition to our presentation, I would like to discuss to you the recently issued Revenue Regulation Number 6-2022 of the BIR last June 30, 2022 regarding the removal of 5-year validity period on receipts and invoices. The 5-year validity period of the permit to use or system-generated receipts or invoices based on the previous revenue issuances are removed. Hence, all permit to use to be issued shall be valid unless revoked by the BIR. Based on Revenue Regulation Number 6-2022, the phrase "this invoice or receipt shall be valid for 5 years from the date of the permit to use" based on Revenue Regulation Number 10-2015 as amended by Revenue Regulation Number 16-2018 and the phrase "valid until" Revenue Memorandum Circular Number 107-2019 shall be omitted. Next is that, as stated also in the RR 6-2022, the authority to print for principal and supplementary invoices or receipt, inclusive of its serial number and its usage, shall also have no expiration. Thus, the phrases "this invoice or receipt shall be valid for 5 years from the date of the ATP" and the phrase "valid until" on the manual receipts or invoices previously required under Revenue Memorandum Order Number 12-2013 shall also be omitted or disregarded for the unused receipt or invoices. So, that's the additional information for the invoicing requirements. So, as a recap, there are information needed for VAT invoice or VAT official receipt to be classified as valid document that can be submitted to the BIR. So after our discussion, there are some common issues that we have encountered based on this topic. So number one issue is that, what are the penalties if a non-VAT person issue a VAT invoice or VAT official receipts? For the seller perspective, If the seller is subject to percentage tax, he or she is required to pay the percentage tax. He or she is also required to pay the VAT or the value added tax due, but without the benefit of the input tax. There is also a 50% surcharge on the value added tax due for the seller. As for the buyer, so if the invoice or the official receipts contains the required informations which are discussed earlier, the purchaser shall be allowed to recognize the input tax credit from its purchases. So there is no negative effect for the buyer. The next common issue is that what shall be the effect of failure to indicate VAT as a separate item in invoice? So for the seller, the invoice prices are deemed exclusive of VAT. So if the seller forgot to present the VAT amount as a separate item in the invoice, the amount presented is deemed exclusive of VAT. So the VAT is to be paid on top of the invoice price. So it is required to add an additional 12% VAT on the invoice price indicated in the document. As for the buyer, if the VAT is not indicated as a separate line item, it is this is subject for disallowance. So disallowance of input tax. So the buyer cannot claim the input tax in its VAT returns or value added tax returns. Next common issue is that what shall be the effect of failure to indicate all required information in the invoice. So these are the name, the business style, the address, and the date of the purchaser. As for the seller, he or she can claim it as an output tax or output VAT due, but for the buyer, it is automatically a disallowance of input tax. So I hope you learned the importance of the invoicing requirements, and you can identify the valid and the invalid documents for your future engagement. So good luck. Thank you for listening, and God bless.